Hey there, folks, and welcome to another episode of Crit Hit Interviews. I'm Arlyeon, and we're here today with Matt Roszak of Kupo Games. Kupo? Man, how do you properly pronounce that?
I don't know if there is a proper pronunciation. It's based on what the Mughals in Final Fantasy say.
Yeah, I know, but it doesn't help that the earlier games weren't voiced.
Yeah, I have no idea how it's supposed to be pronounced, but I just say Kupo.
Okay, well, we'll go with that, since it is your company, so Kupo Games. Who you folks may recognize as the developer of the epic Battle Fantasy series, Adventure Story, Bullet Heaven, and there's some other titles too, like the thing that's basically the Samurai Showdown from Kirby.
Yeah, it's really old. Brawl Royale.
Yeah. I mean, I remember it when it was new because I'm a geezer
It's not much of a game. It's just press one button to progress the movie, basically.
and fail a
But
lot and fail a lot if your
pretty fun.
reflexes are terrible.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, to start these interviews off, we tend to have a little icebreaker questions and the like. So I figured I'd give you the generally what is the easier question, though not for everyone, of just what's your favorite game?
I wouldn't be able to tell you what my favorite game of all time is because that kind of changes. But over the last few years, I'd say are Undertale, the new Doom, and The Witness.
I'm familiar
With
with
those,
one of them.
which one?
Undertale. I wanna try out the new Doom, but I haven't, and The Witness is on my wish list, but haven't gotten around to it.
They're all games that are they're really good, but they're also hard to recommend because I think they really depend on what your tastes are to a lot of people, and some people just say it makes them feel dizzy and sick from running around so fast.
Wait, which one?
New one because
Oh.
it's like it's really fast paced. It's a first person shooter, but most of the time you're just running up to monsters and punching them.
I
Really
mean,
fun, but a lot of people didn't really enjoy it as much as I did.
does it have head bob? Because moving super fast with head bob can be a bit horrible.
I think a little bit. I don't really remember, but yeah, my brother said it just made him dizzy.
Ah, I'll probably still try it one
And it's a
eventually.
similar case with The Witness. I really like the game, but I'm sure a lot of people will play it and they'll just think it's too hard or it's too slow paced, and it just makes like a lot of people feel stupid when they play it as well.
So like Riven, because like
Yeah, like I think that's what it's inspired by, like the old Myst games.
I cleared two of the missed
I
games,
never actually played those. Yeah,
but I got stuck on Riven and the stupid alternate alphabet, which can go to hell.
yeah.
Yeah, small fact, I never
Well,
beat Riven.
this is worth trying, I guess, if it sounds like something that might appeal to you. But at the same time, I understand that for a lot of people, it might just not really be their thing.
Huh, fair enough. Now, you're actually a fellow Canadian, albeit not in Canada.
Yeah.
So, I was wondering, do you ever miss living in Canada, or have you enjoyed your escape from the glacial heckhole that it currently is?
I don't know Canada that well because I left when I was 7. But the one thing I really do miss is the snow because I always remember that being a lot of fun, and you could just spend a few weeks just building snow forts and stuff. And I don't really get a chance to do that much over here. It
Oh,
doesn't snow very much, so I think that's what I miss the most.
I mean, we're alternating right now between lots of snow and freezing rain, which, I mean,
Sounds fun.
honestly, I'll take the snow over freezing rain.
I experienced freezing rain a few years ago when I went to Sweden, and that was pretty terrifying. Hill and just sliding around.
Yeah, no, it's really bad when you're like trying to leave your home and the doorknob is frozen shut from all the freezing rain. It's good. Finally gives with like a crunch.
I remember a bit of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. No, I can't think of anything else that I really miss from Canada. I was just too young. I just can't think of anything that would have affected me a lot.
Fair. So suppose back to like gamer questions, but currently, other than The Witness, Undertale, and like the new Doom, are there any games you're currently diving into? I remember you'd mentioned something about having tried out a tabletop game recently.
Oh, I tried out. I think it was called Scythe of
Any?
steampunk
Hmm.
tabletop game, and another one was Small World,
Wait, Small World
which
actually
was
rings a bell.
yeah. I don't know how to describe them because I don't play a lot, so I don't really is. But you kind of just try to take over the map with different units,
So like Risk?
and you have like to that, yeah.
Huh.
Like I said, I'm just kind of getting into it, so I don't have a lot of experience, and I haven't tried a lot of them, so it's all pretty new to me.
No worries. If you have time after the interview, I can always suggest a few, considering it's sort of. I may have been nerding out for 18 years in the tabletop community at this point.
So far, I like my experiences with these games, but they're so time consuming, or at least when you're learning how to play them, everything takes so much longer. So
Yeah.
even if on the box it says, "Oh, this should take 2 hours to play," it ends up taking like four because hey,
I mean,
it's been good fun so far, and I'll probably gradually try out a few more games like that.
fair, fair. I'll give you a forewarning. Arkham Horror is a lot of fun, but it will just eat your day.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's getting my biggest worry with games like that. I like them, but at the same time, where does all my time just disappears? And I want to make sure I don't do this too often.
yeah, I mean, I reserved it for when I was like meeting with friends from out of town who liked that game because it meant like it was a thing we could sit down with like a meal and coffee and just do that and talk and catch up. And it's good for that. And if it's like just a thing you do with like a few people, it sort of limits it from it eating every day of your week for all that time because it will do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I suppose we're gonna dabble still in the gaming thing, but a bit more towards your own games. Now, over the course of like all the epic battle fantasy games and everything surrounding them, the characters have had a lot of different outfits. Some of which are very wonky, and some of which are somewhat more practical. Do you have any specific favorites of the outfits for the epic battle crew?
It's usually, I would say, the default ones that they start with that are kind of the most memorable. And a lot of the designs kind of turned out strangely because when we started animating the characters, I didn't plan to have different outfits. They were supposed to just have one each. I recycled the same animations throughout all the games, so I kind of just had to build on top of what was already there. So
Huh.
I kind of limited the kind of outfits I had to make. Like, uh, for example, that's why all the female outfits have like sleeves that aren't properly attached to the rest of them. They kind of just float on their arms. Because the first one was like that, and it was kind of hard to fix that mistake later.
Huh. Graphic
Explains why
design
they're
hacks.
wonky, but in terms of which ones are my favorites, let's see. Besides the default ones, I really like some of the kind of bulky armor that we have. It's cool. And most of the outfits in the game are kind of silly things. So when you have something that actually looks somewhat practical, it looks quite impressive compared to the silly stuff.
I mean, there's a lot of things that are silly for different reasons.
Yeah, the dragon armor, I think that's what it's called, was
Yeah,
actually wasn't designed by me. It was designed by a fan who did some art for it a long time ago, and I actually put that in the game later, and I'm pretty happy with that one. That one's pretty cool.
yeah. I actually always found it really neat that a lot of the armor was like mix and matchable, which also meant that you could get some sort of neat custom outfits out of it. Not just for
Yeah,
the stat effects, but also the fashion souls, as it were.
I kind of wish that the outfits kind of fit together better because there's a lot of awkward combinations too. And a few people have said that to me that it'd be nice if you could have if you could change how your characters look without actually changing their stats. And I agree with that, and at the same time, I can't really be bothered programming anything like that.
So like
I can
having
see where
a
I can see what
cosmetic
people,
layer.
yeah, like a lot of MMORPGs do.
Yeah.
And I can see where they're coming from because a lot of the outfits look ridiculous if you put them together with the wrong stuff. Way the game is, I guess, it's a bit silly.
It just it's very par for the course and sort of what I've come to expect.
Yeah, but I can totally get why people want to have aesthetic looking characters, but this probably isn't the game to do that in.
So you've already sort of touched a bit on like experiences and things in game development, like mentioning how things have been programmed, but what got you into game development?
I was somewhat interested in it like since I was a kid, like 7 or 8 or something. I just didn't know how to get into it, so I kind of just like drew game ideas on paper, monsters, and like make up stats for them and stuff like that, and kind of draw mock battles on paper. I had no idea what programming was or how any of that stuff actually worked, so I didn't really consider it to be game development, but it kind of is how it started for me anyway.
Hmm. And so like how did you end up transitioning from that into properly putting out your own games?
Let's see. When I was about 12 or 13, I had Flash installed on the family computer and a few other applications. So I played around with those and I kind of gradually started learning how to animate in Flash because it seemed to be the most user friendly of the programs I had. Other programs I had were stuff like Macromedia Director, which I don't think anyone uses anymore. But at the time, that was also a popular animation tool.
It rings a
Played around with
bell.
Flash. What was that?
It rings a bell.
Uh, but I played around with Flash for a few years because it was easy to use, and I got reasonably good at it. My animations were quite popular on Newgrounds, and I didn't know how to program for a long time after I learned Flash. Let's see, for at least 4 or 5 years before I actually kind of started playing around with code. Just really basic stuff that Flash could do, like basically controlling playback of the movie. So it was just like if you press this button, it plays this cutscene. You press this button, it plays something else, and that's basically what the quick draw game was.
Mm, mm.
That was kind of like the really simple coding that I was capable of figuring out on my own. But then I went to university for computing science, and they taught me how to code properly there. And most of what I learned there was really easy to apply to Flash games. And that's kind of where it took off because until then, I didn't really proper coding. They taught a bit of it to us in high school, but I didn't think it was taught that well in high school, so it didn't really click with me at the time.
What was it they taught you? C plus plus and like Perl? Not Perl.
Uh,
QBasic. QBasic was the high school thing I dealt with.
I think they tried to teach us Visual Basic in high school, and I just didn't get into it. I
Hmm.
don't think they kind of enough of it like really fast to like they taught us like a bit every week or so, and by the time you got to the next week you kind of forgot what you learned in the first week, and you didn't like properly build on top of the basics.
Ah.
So like you just didn't have a kind of strong foundation, and you didn't really understand what the code meant, like following the examples and kind of trying to figure it out through trial and error, and it never really clicked with you because you just didn't understand what exactly the computer was doing.
Fair.
When I went to university, they started teaching us Python, and they were just like, "We don't care what you know about coding. We're just going to teach you everything right from the beginning. We're going to teach you what variables are, all the kind of small nuances, and like they taught us like the basics in really high detail, so we knew exactly what our code was doing." And
I'm trying to remember, but wasn't like one of the rules like don't use go-tos basically? Use subroutines, not go-tos.
Which language?
That was probably C++, but it's been a long time for me coding wise. I just remember like
Oh,
being taught not to do
mm,
things, and that's all I remember. Not how to do things, just how not to do things.
can't remember much about C, but they later taught us they taught us C and they taught us Java, and they were like, if you want to know C plus plus, just put those together and you'll figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, C was a nightmare. It was really hard doing all the memory management and complicated stuff. The C gives you a lot of power, and it also gives you a lot of power to mess up your own code.
Yep. Good memories of that. So, I mean, as I was gonna ask you, like, where you learned to develop some of your game development, but you've touched on a lot of that. But what other sort of skills has game development required you to learn?
Mm, in terms of programming or in general?
In general, because I mean, you're sort of a complete package in regards to like stuff you're doing for making your games, other than like Frina who does like the music.
Yeah, I don't do any music at all, so that's one thing I don't know anything about. But in terms of game development, let's see. Well, learning how to conduct yourself on the internet is a surprisingly big one. Like, I learned fairly early on, like people view you in a positive way on the internet, and that's just to like not argue with people. If someone leaves you a bad review or a bad comment, don't argue with them. Just kind of consider what they have to say. And obviously, a big part of my job is about my work and sharing examples of what I'm working on. And I think kind of being able to communicate on the internet without starting any drama has been very useful to me. And you would think that would be common sense, but apparently a lot of people still don't know how to do that.
Nope. I
That's one example. Animation is obviously something I learned over a long time, and that's something you can kind of the basics of animation are pretty simple, but it takes a lot of practice to kind of get used to them and get used to all the tricks that animations flow nicely. So I think that one's mostly down to practice. Timing's really hard. I wouldn't even know where to start.
hmm.
Can go wrong with programming, and I don't know. Is there anything in particular that?
No, it's just sort of a general question here because it's always curious about like what people have picked up for the sake of curiosity, but also the sake of those people who are also looking to get into game development. It's sort of the how you got to the point where you are and what they may need to know. And I think you're actually the first person who's mentioned like being very mindful of communication on the internet.
I think it really helps because, well, if games for fun, it doesn't matter. But if you kind of want to do it professionally, then it really helps to kind of have a good reputation and be good at talking to your fans and just other people in general. Obviously, a lot of people who are into like programming generally don't. The stereotype is that they're not good at talking to people, and in a lot of cases, that's true. Programmers aren't the most social people, so it helps to practice.
Yeah.
In terms of if I was to give advice to people who are getting into games, then I would say like the kind of skills you need just really depend on the types of games you're working on. And if you're not good at something, then you can probably avoid doing that thing and just work on the things you are good at. Like for example, if you're not good at maths, then you don't need to make a game that involves a lot of maths. You can just kind of avoid that and work on.
Fair. Work around your weaknesses. One thing I was like going to mention, you've touched on this as well, was the fact that you don't do the music thing And in fact, Frina's music has actually become a very identifiable aspect of the latter epic battle fantasy games. So, how did you two end up working together?
She contacted me on Newgrounds because said I was looking for music or not, but I did need music either way, and it was because I was starting to get my games sponsored, and my first sponsorship deal was with Armor Games, and they didn't want me to use copyrighted music for obvious reasons. And
Hmm,
until then, I was using music from like Zelda and Final Fantasy and stuff like that because
Gurren
at the
Lagann.
time, like you could get away with that kind of stuff. But since I was getting sponsored, I had to have original music. So I can't remember if I asked for musicians to step forward or not. But at some point, she contacted me and music, and I thought I'd try it out. And I used some of her music. At first, she wasn't making it specifically for my game. I was using just stuff that already existed. Well, and we got along pretty well. Yeah,
Yeah. I
and
mean, some of those tracks are just amazing.
yeah, and that was EBF2 where we started working together. After that, it was she started doing more original tracks, and some of the tracks were still her older work that I was just happy to use. Over time, she started doing more work specifically for my games. She's always been good to work with, no problems, so we just kept it up.
Yeah, it's man, how many games is it now? Because there's all the EBS plus the bullet fantasies, bullet
I think
heaven.
it's been 9 years that we've been working together now. So very long time.
Yeah. So beyond that, I suppose, do you have any other maybe like fun game development related stories just as your time of being like Kupo games?
Fun stuff. I don't know where to begin.
Oh boy.
Well, there's a lot of. I don't want to pick on anyone, but I get a lot of like really silly from just people who have weird ideas, and those are pretty funny to read. Just people asking ridiculous favors from me, like, "Hey, can you put my like self-insert character into your game, and can you make him the final boss and stuff like that?" I hate to read. You do really have to assume that a lot of the people on the internet that you're talking to are just kids who don't really know what they're saying. Otherwise, you would just go insane.
Fair. Uh
I, I'm trying to think what else has been really fun. Well, obviously, just the kind of doing quick prototypes is always fun because you're just kind of at the experimental stage where you're just building fast and just having a little character show up on your screen or whatever. And those first parts of a game are always pretty fun because they go quickly and you don't really know what to expect, and it's just a bit of experimentation. And you've kind of nailed it down, and then you're just fleshing out the details after that, and it's a bit less fun.
I mean, I've really enjoyed looking at like some of the animations you've released for some of the critters before they're actually in the
Yeah,
games.
yeah,
These
yeah.
sketch
That's
critters.
fun to do because fun to work on a small project that kind of stands alone because you don't have like so many things tied together. Once you have the full game, it's really hard to make changes to it because if you change one thing, obviously something else might break, and it's just really hard to play around with stuff at that point. But when you have a small project, you can just work on whatever you want in a day or two and just show people. It's like, hey, this is what I'm working on, and that's fun. The early stages are fun.
Yeah, I suppose like in that regards, like game development can be stressful. So is there anything specifically you do to either to mitigate or manage that stress?
I try not to take any risks, especially financial ones. Like I mostly work by myself, so I don't really have any expenses. If my game flops, then I don't make any money, but I'm not going to lose any either because I haven't paid anyone to do any work for me.
Fair.
So that helps a lot. Just not having any expenses and not taking any huge gambles with my finances because sometimes people quit their day job and use up their life savings to try to make a game. And it works for some people, but I would never encourage you to do that because it will often end badly.
Yeah, it does not work for everyone.
Yeah, in terms of dealing with stress, so there's that. I don't take any risks. And like I said earlier, I just kind of assume that everyone I'm talking to on the internet is some kind of kid who doesn't speak English very well and doesn't have any social skills. So that way, if I get any mean or annoying comments, I can just give them the benefit of the doubt and not get angry. Assumed I was always talking to an adult, then some of the things that I hear sometimes would drive me insane.
I mean, the difference between some adults and children is very fine.
Yeah, but that's kind of the thing that's nice about the internet. You don't really know who you're talking to, and usually that's for the better because you can just assume, you can give them the benefit of the doubt, and you can think that, oh, maybe there's some good reason this guy is acting this way, and it's not really his fault. You don't know that for sure, but it makes it easier to cope.
Hmm. Hmm.
But not to say that I get a lot of people like that. To be fair, like most of the comments I get are really nice, and most of the people I deal with are great. But you get a few weird comments every once in a while, and a few angry ones. Help if you get angry or upset with them. You should just, you know,
Stay calm and carry on.
yeah, exactly. Like I don't even block people on most of my social media because it's not worth the trouble. Because then they get confused or angry and then they contact you on somewhere else and they're like, why did you block me? I don't think I did anything wrong. So I just can't be bothered dealing with people like that. So I just ignore people if they annoy me, and they usually stop annoying me after a while. And I don't
Fair.
I don't need to escalate things. I don't need to block anyone. I just ignore them until they get bored and everything's fine. The question was about stress relief. But yeah, I think that's it. Just like don't let people don't let people wind you up. Don't get angry, and don't do anything crazy with your finances.
Words of sage, practical advice. And the best part is, it does not take a gross amount of physical activity to do, like exercise.
Yeah, it's not that hard. You just have to try to stay calm and be reasonable.
So, at this point, this is basically the sum of all the general questions I had. So, I'm going to dive into the Epic Battle Fantasy V related ones because I got a bunch.
Excellent.
So, kicking things off, I'd actually gone through and cleared it recently. I went through and also wrote like a review for it, which is going up. You'll find out what the review is like when it's actually up there one day. One day. But so Epic Battle Fantasy, like its predecessors, is like a turn-based RPG system with a whole lot of options at players' disposal, both in the sense of gear, summons, and also the difficulty, as well as like the items, etc. at their disposal. How difficult was it to balance all of that to provide like a fair, enjoyable challenge?
Oh well, the game being a sequel helps a lot because I've had a long time to practice, and I know from previous games what kind of works well and what doesn't. Uh, I do release kind of whatever I'm working on as soon as people. I release it as soon as possible. So in this case, I had the battle demo on my website, which is just the battle system with all the skills and enemies available, and people could try that out. They could play around with the skills and see what's overpowered and what's not. It's just mostly user feedback and having hundreds of beta testers really early on in the process kind of play through the game and tell me what they think and what
Hmm.
doesn't. Cases in a lot of cases, I don't really balance it that well before release. I'm still kind of changing a few things even now that people have told me don't really work well. But for the most part, giving people difficulty options makes balancing a lot easier because I don't have to worry about the game being too hard or too easy because the player can just change it themselves. So that's always a good backup kind of feature to have.
So when you're programming everything, what is like the difficulty you're programming it around then? Are you starting at like epic difficulty and working your way backwards, considering it's so friggin' boosted compared to normal?
I always kind of make sure the games are challenging for me on the hardest difficulty, and then I kind of work down from there for the average player. The normal difficulties, well, basically all the enemies do half as much damage compared to the hardest. So if I can play the game on the hardest difficulty, I'm assuming most people can play it with enemies doing half as much damage, you know. And that's about it. That's how I test it. I just make sure it's possible to beat enemies, and then just half all of their stats, and just assume that that'll be easy enough for everyone else.
Yeah, fair. I mean, just to actually mention this a bit about you're still in the process of keeping up to date with patching the game, but you've also mentioned in a recent post, and someone else who also dropped in one of my streams mentioned that you'd removed some cheesy combos and tactics from Epic Battle Fantasy V. So, is there any favorite ones you'd like to mention?
Well, there's a lot of status effects in the game, and a lot of them combo together. Like for example, you can make enemies wet, and then they take more thunder damage. For example, so if you do enough status effects like that, it can multiply your damage by like 100 times or more. Number, but
Yeah.
you can do crazy combos like that if you get the right status effects. So a lot of people have just found kind of ways of killing bosses in one turn just by all the status effects that actually work on the bosses. And each boss is resistant to quite a few status effects, but usually not all of them. So there's always some different combination for each boss of status effects that will work well on them. And once you set that up correctly, you can kill most of them in one hit, which a lot of people have been having fun figuring out. And for the most part, I'm okay with that because your average player isn't going to figure it out on his first playthrough. Is the tricks to beating them are a bit too obvious. Against the evil players, on a lot of them, poison worked too well, and there's quite a lot of ways of just stacking lots of poison on the bosses and making them just basically die over time instead of you actually having to attack them. So I had to nerf that quite a bit.
I found out what is it? Who's the one who prevents you from getting positive stat buffs out of the evil players?
That was Anna.
Yeah, I tried to use the little bot that reverses the debuffs, and it didn't work. And I was like, fuck, that
I
should have
think that was the
worked.
recent change I made because in the first version, I believe that did work, and a lot of people thought it was overpowered and made the boss too easy. So I had to fix that.
Yeah, all of their tactics are actually. I found them amongst the bosses some of the most interesting ones, like all the alternate slash evil players. I say alternate just because the last one you fight. And it was neat how they all had their specific mechanics to deal with, like Evil Nat being like, "Oh, healing? Yeah, you don't get that. You can get reses, but you can't get healing." Like, I thought that was really neat how each one had very different approaches to the fight, and I was sort of curious, like, how much had been altered, because, like, I only went through it very recently, so I got to poke into it after I guess a lot of the fine tuning's gone into it. Also, that fucking glitch boss.
Yeah, the evil players kind of turned out the way they did because I didn't have a lot left to make bosses interesting. Like all the earlier bosses kind of tricks that bosses could do, so I had to make up new status effects for the battles to make them more interesting. And I think it worked really well because it turned out that basically each battle kind of just disables one of your kind of disable some mechanics, like some disable summoning, some disable healing, like you said. And I think that turned out to be a pretty good challenge.
Yeah,
Happy with how they turned out.
and the final one just kills you. The final one just
Yeah,
kills you brutally.
I tried to go all out with that and just make him as powerful as I could and still try to keep him beatable.
What was the hardest challenge while either making this game or just in the aftermath of its release?
Just keeping sane, I think, because it was taking so long to make. I knew I could finish it because it was a sequel and I've done it before, but it was just so much bigger than the previous games. that it was just hard to kind of keep working on it over such a long period of time.
Just to give perspective, like how long did this project take you compared to its predecessor?
It was at least twice as long, maybe a bit more. EBF5 took 3 years working full time, or probably took a bit less than 1.5. And obviously, when you're going over 2 years on a game, that's usually usually means you're pushing your luck. You probably don't want to go over 2 years.
Fair.
It just means you're starting to gamble with quite a lot of time.
So now that it's out, though, you've actually currently been hinting at and even showcasing like more things being added to it now that it's out there, showcasing some monsters and bosses, like the sketch creature that I referenced earlier, as well as references to a library dungeon. So,
Yeah, I've talked about this a little bit on Discord, but I haven't written it up in a proper blog post yet, so not everyone knows all the details. So I might as well share a bit of those now. So the library dungeon is going to be a dungeon that contains kind of paper themed enemies. The origami stuff I posted earlier, but also just kind of pencil sketched enemies. So I had a bit of fun drawing those, and I hope people enjoy those as well.
in regards to the upcoming update and the like, is it going to be specifically the library dungeon being added, or are there other that are going to be included in this particular mix?
Yes, there's a few. I haven't finalized them yet, but the other one I'm doing is the kind of battle arena area, and that's where you will have for each of your characters where they fight, well, where you fight with just one character at a time, and they all have kind of different themselves, and that will kind of be focused around each character's strengths. So they all fight monsters that kind of complement their abilities. I haven't really done in the series, kind of one player combat versus a lot of enemies. So that might be a fun challenge.
Hmm.
The third dungeon that I would like to do is a kind of I called it a time machine earlier, but I don't know if it will be a time machine. But it will be some kind of dungeon where you just fight enemies from previous games and bosses.
So like Akron and Godcat.
Maybe not them, but we'll see exactly which ones I pick later. But yeah, it'll basically be kind of like just a kind of flashback to earlier games. The old bosses will come back, or some of them will anyway, and a chance for you to try out your new skills and stuff from this game on older enemies. And they won't really be updated much. I'll probably use the same graphics and music and stuff for them. So it will kind of just be like a throwback to the old games, and you might have a bit of fun just trying out the new mechanics on older enemies. And so those three dungeons will appear in the game, and then the little pixel art monsters that I'm doing now, they won't have a dungeon. They'll just kind of be scattered around the world in little secret areas,
Hmm.
probably.
Like the glitch areas or areas of their own.
Something similar to that, but I don't know the details yet.
So in terms of just general size to the world at large, how expansive is the upcoming update going to be, and how are they going to fit in with, I guess, the existing world?
I can't really estimate how big it's going to be until I've like almost finished it and played through it. It will be kind of similar to the. It'll be similar to size to what you get when you buy the Steam version compared to the free version. So you'll get a few extra dungeons and some kind of challenging bosses that should hopefully keep you busy for a while.
Okay, yeah, that gives me a
But
pretty good idea.
I don't know. I'm hoping that it'll be at least 3 or 4 hours of gameplay if you're playing on normal mode, on a harder mode. But well, I was planning to do besides the extra content was to add kind of challenge modes for replaying the game with different settings.
Oh God.
I don't know how many of those I'll do, but I've got a few ideas of like You can play the game with different weather conditions or randomized weapon locations or slightly different enemies in each battle, something like that. So even if you finish the game, you'll have a bit more reason to play it again with slightly different stuff in it.
Hmm.
Some people have suggested making harder difficulty levels as well, and I might have some settings to help with that, like kind of gameplay mechanics that I thought were maybe too hard, and I didn't put them in the game. So we'll see if I come up with a lot of ideas for that. But one of the ideas I had was that when you die and you get revived, you'll lose your turn.
Oof.
Revive all of your characters, and then they can't all take a turn. Like if your guys die, you lose that turn, and it's going to be really hard to get back up after that. So that's one of the challenging settings that I'd kind of like to try out and see if people find it interesting or not.
I'm
That I
picturing
would
that
like to
on
add to
epic
just kind
mode,
of
and oof.
it's going to be hard, and I'm probably not going to make a lot of achievements for it because I don't want people to feel like they need to do it. It's kind of just going to be for fun if you feel like you want an extra challenge. But I don't want to force anyone to have to play on the super hard mode or anything like that.
Uh, so,
Playability if you want it.
so I think you already sort of alluded to this to a degree, but compared to the existing content, how difficult is this going to be? Is it going to be like the Battle Mountain, how it added like a lot of very challenging things compared to the main game, or
I don't think there's gonna be anything harder than what's in the game at the moment, but we'll see. I haven't programmed any of the monsters yet, so I don't really know how they're gonna turn out. Is to make a lot of mini boss type monsters. Like obviously, there's already tons of battles in the game, and people are probably bored of the normal stuff. So I'm gonna try to make a lot of the monsters just kind of mini boss level. So they're not gonna be super hard, but each battle is gonna be slightly interesting,
hmm.
and you won't be fighting the same enemies too many times. They'll like appear once. They'll be a unique monster. Pixel art enemies, especially, I want them all to be mini bosses. So you'll only see them once in the game, but they'll be quite challenging, but not incredibly hard either.
Okay. Will this update be including any new quests? Since it's like the secret areas with the pixel creatures. I was like, is that going to be like a quest thing in the same sense as the other one, or?
Probably not, because I don't really have too much space on the world map to hide stuff like that anymore. I'm a bit limited because I'm not really going to revisit the world map and move things around too much.
And are we going to see a use for the acid-proof boots finally?
I don't think so. I can't think of any way I could use them that would not be really forced.
Fair.
I said the new content wouldn't be super hard, but the one player battles might actually be hard. I don't know. We'll see how that goes. I haven't programmed them yet, so I don't know how challenging they will be, but it's very possible they could be pretty hard.
Yeah, I'm picturing going into it with like the way I've set up no legs, and it'll either go very well or very poorly for me. Especially since
Uh,
if the area levels up with me, he's like level 40 or 41 right now. That might be an issue.
I think it's going to require some very kind of specific planning before you go into the battle. I'm hoping that it will force players to use different equipment from when they usually would. Like, I think the life draining weapons will be much more useful in these battles because you won't have that much time to heal. But we'll see how it goes. I hope it forces people to use new strategies, and it should be quite challenging
Oh, is it actually going
as
to be
well.
bringing in either new skills or gear to the mix of existing
Not too
things?
many, but there's still some space for new skills and some new flares. So I'll try to fill up some of the space that's in the game right now. And by space, I mean there's your interface. All the weapon kind of windows, they're all full, and I don't want to change the interface to fit more weapons in. Flares I can do. I can add a third page of flares possibly, because there's two pages now.
Spiffy. Yeah, other than that, I guess for a more low-key thing, you've recently have the Chinese New Year event sort of pop out in Epic Battle Fantasy, which had some neat stuff associated with it. Do you have any more holiday events in mind?
Not sure. I did the Chinese New Year because apparently I have a lot of Chinese players on Steam, which I didn't kind of expect. It's almost 20% of the players on Steam are Chinese, so
Huh.
that's why I did it. I don't really plan on doing any other holiday quests unless I find a really good reason to do it.
Hmm. Fair enough. So, other than that, is there any bit of like cut content that didn't make into the game that you wanted in there but found unfeasible to ultimately add?
Not really, because that's what I'm doing now. I'm just working on all the stuff that I didn't finish. I'm just working on leftover ideas that I thought would be fun.
Oh,
I think anything that was left over, I'll probably kind of try to add it in over the next few months. It
sweet.
it, it should be fun because I kind of made sure that the game had all the most important parts, just like normal bosses, normal areas, and a lot of the fun stuff. I kind of battle arena. That was a fun idea, but I figured I didn't really have time to do it right away, so I'm adding it now. And I hope a lot of people find these new areas fun because I think that they're fun to work on so far. And I'm just kind of exploring the I'm exploring that. I'm exploring kind of mechanics that I didn't really explore in the game so far, like many combats. Once these new dungeons are done, I think pretty much all the ideas I had left over will be done, and there won't be much left.
Do you have like a tentative ETA for when you think you'll be done these?
I have no idea. I'm assuming it'll take at least half a year, maybe more. I just have no idea. It just depends how hard I work, and I'm kind of trying to take a break after launch and just not work as hard as I used to.
Hey, fair, fair. Everyone deserves a break.
Yeah, I'm still keeping a an eye on the Discord and on all the kind of user messages I get. So
I know, it's how I got a hold of you.
don't think I'm neglecting the game. I'm just not working full time at the moment. I'm basically working part time for a while. So I won't have as much game content coming out for a while, but I'm still keeping an eye on fan arts and stuff like that. So I'll have other stuff to post on my website and wherever. Yeah,
Oh,
I can't give you any estimation on when the next update will be because I really have no idea, and I also don't like to make promises.
yeah, no worries on that. I just random question here, but is the library dungeon going to be attached to the museum or somewhere else in the world, or have you not really figured out where it's getting plunked down?
I was thinking to put it under the library in the second town.
Oh,
Yeah,
oh, literally library. Okay.
I mean, I think that's where it fits the best, and that's probably a good time in the game to try out another dungeon because you'll have all of your characters by then, all five of them. So yeah, it's a good chance to try out a new dungeon at that point in the game.
So this is a bit more also related to, I guess, the future projects, but it's a pretty nice transition. There's like a certain grave in Epic Battle Fantasy V that had me curious as to whether you intended this specific edition it to be like the capstone for the Epic Battle Fantasy segment, at least currently. Care to give me a comment on that? The
That
here
is how
lies
I feel
every
about it.
mook that asks about EBF5 or EBF6.
I do feel like EBF5 should be the last one, but I have felt that way about the last two games as well. So it's hard to say if I'll make more or not. I really don't want to spend 3 years on a game ever again because that's just too long. A few years of resting, I'll maybe consider it. But who knows? I'm not promising anything.
Which, yeah, on the subject of what comes next, like you already dabbled into there was the reaction based dueling game we've talked about, Brawl Royale. There's been a pair of bullet hells. There's been five RPGs now, at least that I'm aware of. And there's also the platformer. Like, are there any other genres you have an interest in dabbling in, or one being revisited? And will they sort of be part of the same universe, if so?
I'll definitely keep with the same universe because I just like using the same characters, and I think all the players appreciate that. it's kind of it's a good way of doing marketing because when people see my newer games, they'll kind of recognize the style and the characters, and I won't have to rebuild my audience from scratch. But in terms of game genres, I could probably try whatever. I always have new ideas whenever I'm playing a game I like. I always think, hey, I'd like to try making something like this, but obviously I don't have time to just work on everything. We'll see. I'll probably come up with some idea that I get stuck into for a while.
Fair.
Tell you what I was playing around with last, and that was kind of like Flash Revolution, which is basically like Dance Dance Revolution, but with a keyboard.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that.
I wanted to make a game like that where instead of just pressing keys to the music, you're pressing keys to fight monsters. Like monsters throw like arrows at you, and you have to press the correct keys on your keyboard in the right direction and stuff like that.
It's
So kind of
like
like Paper Mario, kind of like Flash Revolution, something like that.
rhythm-based combat.
Yeah, kinda. Yeah, I made a quick prototype of that, and maybe I'll get back to it later.
I'm just thinking of Crypt of the Necrodancer, actually.
Mm, I don't know if it'll turn out like that, but it'll be some kind of rhythmy battle game. And it's probably going to be really simple. It's not going to be a major project, so don't expect anything too impressive.
Fair, fair. So, we're sort of winding down towards the end of this interview, so I just wanted to know, first off, if there's anything you'd like to share with the audience at this juncture that you may not have already.
Hmm. Well, I guess I like sharing advice to people who are trying to get into video games. And my advice is usually make sure you actually publish the games that you're working on. If you're playing around and trying to make a simple game, make sure you actually finish it, and so other people can tell you what they think of it. Because that's useful for feedback, but it's also useful for motivation. So if you're interested in making games and you actually get people working on, then you'll feel much better about it, or much worse if they don't like it. But they'll tell you what's wrong with it, and you'll know what to do better next time. So it's really important to actually finish the projects you're working on, and don't just leave them half done. So that would be my like advice to people starting off. Quits your day job.
So yeah, other than that, just lastly, are there any indie projects that you've had your eye on?
At the moment, let's see.
Do you have a massive like wish list too?
I do have a massive wish list, but I wanted to delete it because it was too big, but Steam doesn't let me delete my whole wish list thing forever and never actually does it. Very annoying.
I just keep mine as I'll eventually get to it.
There's a few developers on Twitter that I'm following. I don't know how to pronounce it, but this one guy's working on a game called Renane or something like that. Renane? Yeah, I'm gonna look up the spelling. It's spelled Renaine, so
Renane?
rename. Yeah, overcoming failure.
Huh.
It's got a really interesting art style. Uh, it's like pixel art, but kind of all the colors are separated from each other, and none of the different colors touch. Looking, and I'm quite looking forward to it.
I'm sort of looking at it in like it's sort of Shovel Knighty almost in like the
Yeah, it
animation
looks a bit
style.
like that as well. Yeah. There's also I feel like I should have a better list, but all these games that I just kind of follow passively on Twitter, I just can't remember their names.
That's sort of the same because there's so many games I follow at this point, and it's like I can't buy most of them. I'm just a poor boy from a poor family. Easy
I
come.
just don't have enough time.
Oh, I mean,
There's
time's fine. I just won't sleep, and then I'll get sick again.
Oh no, that's not good. Yeah, well,
Yeah,
there's definitely a lot of cool games out there these days, but there's also more games out there than anyone can possibly play.
unless there's an afterlife, then
Yeah,
I'm
unless that.
solid.
Yeah. 'Cause there's a lot of indie games that I like that I feel don't get as much attention as they should, but at the same time, no one's got time to play everything.
That's why my channel's around. I just do indie game stuff.
Yeah, that's good. That's nice.
But yeah, I suppose that sums everything up. It is outro time. So, folks, if you enjoyed this interview and also the bit of footage that comes with it, you can buy/wishlist Epic Battle Fantasy V on Steam. Also, its predecessor. Also, the Bullet Fantasy games. So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff you can buy. And for news, there's at Kupo Games on Twitter. Plus, they have a spiffy website that you can check out with links to it in the video description. They also have a Facebook.
See you later, everyone. And I hope this interview was okay and that I wasn't too awkward.
Nah, you were a blast to chat with. And I mean, considering I've been like following your game since I was like a wee kid, it was actually pretty awesome to get the opportunity to like meet you and chatter with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, I'll catch you folks later. I hope you enjoyed this interview. And, if you did enjoy this, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section. If you enjoyed this or not, likes or dislikes, I'll take them. It gives me feedback. And, if you want to see more, either developer interviews or just the reviews of the indie games I cover, feel free to hit the subscribe button and the little bell icon so you actually get alerts, because YouTube doesn't alert you unless you do that. Thanks, YouTube. Anyways, see ya, folks.